Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
And I am Tony DeQuano.
So, Tony, let's continue our summer blockbuster series with our first actual war movie. I mean, we've done some Star Wars movies, and those are about wars. This is a straight up war movie.
And, we've done Braveheart, which involves some battles. Mm-hmm. Same with Gladiator, but we haven't had a movie that would truly be classified as a war movie.
Yeah, and this one's fitting, because Memorial Day was just a few days ago, just a week or so ago, and coming up in a couple of days is the anniversary of D-Day, and this movie starts out with the invasion of Normandy on D-Day.
So I'm guessing that movie is Saving Private Ryan.
That movie is indeed Saving Private Ryan. Good old Tom Hanks, Matt Damon,
Tom
Sizemore.
I mean, it's directed by Steven Spielberg.
Yes. We even have Adam Goldberg, who is not in a whole lot that we would normally watch, really.
No.
He's only been in a handful of things that I've, found myself watching.
So,
you got Jeremy Davies,
Vin Diesel.
Yeah, Vin Diesel. Yeah.
Who is no stranger to blockbusters.
Even Ted Danson.
Ted Danson, Paul Giamatti.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Paul Giamatti's in here too.
Giovanni Ribisi.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing about this movie. I was kind of just chewing on this a little bit, watching the movie, and then afterwards. So last week we talked about how we had such a small cast, right? And this week we have a movie with a huge cast.
Yes.
And what's the interesting thing about it, though, is that the central cast of this movie actually is quite small.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, but there is actually a bunch of well-known actors, like we were talking, like Ted Danson, Dennis Farina, that have basically one, maybe two scenes.
Nathan Fillion, he's in there too.
Nathan Fillion, right? One of his first roles, actually.
Mm-hmm.
This is
before Firefly.
We don't see them again, whether it's because they die or they just the soldiers move on to the next
serve
they
their
continue on with their mission,
and
then there's a host of other just actors just playing small roles. I was looking through the IMDb credits, and there's just a bunch of people that are just listed as soldier on beach, or soldier here, or whatever it is. Even why can't I think of his name right now? I'll say it this way. Even Heisenberg is in this movie.
Bryan Cranston.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
He's really more of a senior official.
I forgot that he was in this movie. I forgot he was until he showed up. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. That's Bryan Cranston.
Oh yeah, it's Bryan Cranston. And there's another, I can't think of his, if I brought IMDb up right now, there's another actor in that scene that I recognized, and he was just, not the name that Bryan Cranston is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just as a whole host of movies where he's like a character actor, in just a few scenes, right?
Oh yeah.
There's just so many actors that are like that in this film. There's even ones where I wrote the names down and I recognize them in other things, but they have small roles. And the funny thing is, Matt Damon's in this. Matt Damon's a huge star now.
Yeah. So
right.
The funny thing is, Matt Damon was cast in this because Spielberg was looking for sort of just an all-American guy.
Right. Well, that's what
this
I was going to mention that.
Yeah. So he cast him before Good Will Hunting came out. And then
so he had cast him because I guess he had visited the set and had kind of met him, but Good Will Hunting was not expected to be this huge hit.
Yeah. So
and he liked him.
Yeah. So by the time Saving Private Ryan came out, Good Will Hunting had already won the Oscars that it won, and Matt Damon had taken home his statues, and he was a huge name just in time for this movie to come out.
Well, this is what I remember of it, right? So, because Good Will Hunting was came out in like the fall, winter, Christmas season, right, of 1997, right, when Titanic was out, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously the Titanic won. It was the big winner that year for the all the awards, but Good Will Hunting was right there in the mix with a lot of them. Kind of along with LA Confidential, As Good as It Gets. And then that following summer, at the end of July, Saving Private Ryan came out, right? And I remember at the time, it was a big deal because it's a Spielberg movie, and Tom Hanks obviously was, a superstar, right? So he was a big draw. And even the studios were thinking like, oh, well, this movie's a little bit more serious than what we're used to for the summer. But because it was Spielberg and Hanks, they rolled with it, right?
Yeah.
But then, the other name that was attached into that, even though his name was, I guess he was he was fourth listed. Probably mostly because, granted, he's the title character, but because Good Will Hunting was kind of a surprise hit, and he kind of went along with that, right?
Yeah.
So now it's like, oh, this is like the next movie for Matt Damon. You obviously would continue to have a big career, right? But at the time, Tom Sizemore was probably the most notable name.
Yeah. And there was a good chance that Tom Sizemore wasn't going to end up in the movie.
Yes. Well, he had to be sober.
Yeah. Yeah, because he was going through a big, drug addiction at the time. And Spielberg told him, he gave him an ultimatum, basically. He told him, if you want to be in this movie, you're going to be blood tested every day. And if it hits even once, you're out, and I'm reshooting all of your scenes with somebody else, even if it is the very end of production. And so he was able to make it through the entire production sober, and he didn't have to be replaced,
which is great because I think he's really, really great.
He's fantastic in this role.
And so the third name that was kind of listed kind of on the poster head was Edward Burns, right? Which is funny. I remember he was kind of an indie darling at the time. Yeah, he did a few other studio films after this, but he's mostly just kind of stayed under the radar for most of his career, just writing and directing a few independent movies, not bothering at the big, critic hits or award darlings, right? But he was one of the other more notable guys at the time. And then what was it? Giovanni Ribisi, and then Jeremy Davies.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, aside from, Damon, most of the other actors that we were mentioning within kind of the unit were youngish actors that were mostly unknown.
I mean,
to kind of give that feel of just everyday, young men fighting this war.
Like you mentioned before, briefly is, Vin Diesel, a pre-Fast and Furious Vin Diesel.
Yeah, right. I remember, I forget which time I watched this movie. It was after Fast and Furious. Like, oh, I didn't realize Vin Diesel was in this movie. I realized some of the other actors like Giovanni Ribisi were in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Vin Diesel's like, oh, okay, Vin Diesel's in this movie. And it's kind of a Vin Diesel type role, but not quite a Vin
I
Diesel
mean,
type role.
the character, Caparzo, Private Caparzo, was written for Vin Diesel.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's very much a Vin Diesel role because it was written for him.
But it's
it was weird seeing him with hair.
Yes.
It wasn't long hair, but it was still hair.
It's still hair. And again, they all do a great job with the roles.
Mm-hmm.
They fit into them, and I like how none of them are like these overdrawn caricatures.
Yeah.
Right? They just kind of feel like real soldiers.
Yeah.
That, yeah, faced incredible odds. And so
what's crazy is before they started filming, Spielberg put all of the leads, like the entire, like Tom Hanks' entire group, through really rigorous like military boot camp style training.
I've always loved this little bit of trivia.
And he didn't make Matt Damon do it. So everybody had to go through all this really rigorous, training that everybody was ready to quit. Yeah, except Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was the only one that was actually pushing through and was able to inspire the others to continue and to finish off that training. But he intentionally didn't put Matt Damon through it because he wanted the other actors to despise him the way that the characters despise him.
Right. Yes. Yeah. They want that realism, jealousy, but resentment.
Yeah, that resentment. Yeah. Yeah, that's a better word. Yeah,
and it works. And there's so many incredible things about this movie. This is probably only maybe my 5th time watching it.
Same here. I've seen this movie a few times, but not a lot of times.
The funny thing about it is, so much of the movie just stays with you that, it's like, yeah, it feels like you know the movie really well. I mean, there's a few details here and there that you might easily kind of forget, or you might forget that some particular actor might have this, maybe had this scene.
Yeah.
But, because, I mean, it gets seared into there. I mean,
yeah.
And it's not just the, obviously the invasion on, Omaha Beach, right? It's not just the ending battle there at Rommel. It's, there's other things in between that you just remember so kind of vividly.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to just how, I mean, Spielberg is such a fantastic director, right? Yeah, it's a testament to him and the acting and the writing.
Yes.
And there's just the whole craft of the movie.
Absolutely.
And even like Tom Hanks, like what I like about Tom Hanks in this role is, like, okay, right away, not necessarily think of him being a military captain in a war, but at the same time, like, but like most of these people that were men that were fighting over in Europe were ordinary guys.
Yeah. They were ordinary guys that were put in this situation.
Whether it be the privates, the medics, or just even like the captains. And, one of Tom Hanks's big qualities, and we've discussed this before when we've had movies with him, is like, he has a very everyman type quality to him.
Yeah.
Despite even being like really famous. And he taps really, really well into that for this role.
Yeah, he does.
And it helps sell it.
Absolutely. And I mean, another thing that sells this movie is just Spielberg's attention to detail. Like,
oh yes,
bringing on the realism and the just every detail. Like you got Private Jackson, Barry Pepper's character.
Right.
You know, that first time you see him bring his rifle up, he's their sniper. First time you see him bring that rifle up, if you look at his thumbnail, you know, it's got that that burst blood vessel under it that, you know, because that was very common with snipers when they're pushing the rounds in the magazine. You know, sometimes that action will hit them and they'll pinch their thumb in there. You know, so that was a very common thing among especially snipers. You know, or in the Omaha Beach scene, you know, they had about 1,000 extras.
Yes.
For that. And 30 to 40 of them, he actually brought amputees in there.
Right.
So that all those people that are, you know, losing limbs and everything like that, there were actually people who lost limbs. You know, so, well, you know, I mean, for one thing, it helps save money from having to, you know, digitally remove the limbs. But also, you know, it just adds that extra level of realism to it.
Yes. Well, you know, one I kind of think about is, you know, you have the guy there that, you know, he's just searching for his arm on the beach.
Yeah. And when he finds it, he picks it up and just walks away with it.
You
know, it's just, he's in shock.
Yeah, right. You know, he's standing up completely oblivious that there's, you know, we'll get into more of the story.
Yeah.
As, you know, mortars are falling and bullets are whizzing by him.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's in shock and he just needs to find his arm.
I mean, in real life,
right?
Not everybody's going to be, you know, that gung-ho badass that's in every other movie. You know,
right.
In real life, sure, there are some that are going to, you know, run toward the gunfire. But others, you know, they're going to be in shock. They're going to be they're not going to know what to do.
Yes.
You know,
I think there's, I forget where I read it on, where it was just reading different, especially like veteran reactions to this. Because even at the time, I mean, I remember this when this came out, how, you know, there were a bunch of, you know, veterans that couldn't watch it because it was, you know, so realistic and it just would trigger their PTSD.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's one guy who was just saying that, like, oh, like, yeah, the entire thing was a blur, right? And not a blur in the sense of, like, you know, how sometimes where you're like, you know, if someone's been like in a car accident or kind of a intense experience, right?
Yeah.
You don't really remember everything because it's just kind of hazy.
Yeah, because you're...
No, but for this guy, it's like, no, it's because, like, I just had my face in the sand crawling up the beach. Right? And you kind of get the sense of some of these guys here that are just kind of in that same situation. They're pushing forward however they can.
Yeah, just inch by inch.
You know, it's even small things like that.
Yeah, I mean, even at the beginning of that scene, you get a lot of that. You know, you get, you know, as the landing craft are coming in, you know, you get the ones that actually survive getting off those boats. The first thing they're doing is running for cover, and they're just sitting there behind whatever cover they can find.
Yes,
you know, and they're just inching forward.
But it's just so well crafted. And, you know, I was reading, you know, just even particularly about that scene as you know, talking about how well made it is that, you know, the cinematographer, you know, was discussing this, you know, I guess, I think around the 20th anniversary of the movie. And it was like, yeah, you know, Steven just told me, like, yeah, no, just go around just filming whatever you can see just on the beach, and we'll get through it. We'll figure out what we're going to keep and how we're going to portray just, you know, especially when it came to like there's extras like you were talking about. Yeah. Because I can't find it right now. It's okay. I can talk about it. I was talking about the movie, some of the trivia. We talked about some of that. but I was reading it. Yeah, so roughly, I think it was roughly 103 screen deaths that you see in this scene, which is like about 25 minutes long.
Yeah,
Right?
and there's only like in the
we'll talk all
entire
about
movie,
that, yeah,
there's like 225 deaths
overall.
total.
Yeah, I mean,
overall.
there's so much in this entire movie,
and yeah, about half of that is just the opening scene.
Yes. What's the other kind of incredible thing? We can talk about some of the themes as we kind of progress within the movie. Like, there's so many other characters that you get introduced to that when you leave them, they're alive, and then we don't know what happens to them after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might go home, they might not go home.
Yeah,
like that. That's the movie does a great job of kind of conveying that sense.
Yeah, it does.
That all of them are just doing what they can to survive that day that they're in, right? And it's a movie that, I think overall does a great job of showing just the ordinary heroism and like the valor of them.
Yeah.
But again, like as you talked about, it's not like it's not super gung ho about it. Also, like it's very real that war is hell.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a time and space for movies like Commando,
mm-hmm.
right? And Rambo. But then you have this, and it's such a fantastic movie, and I really enjoyed watching it again.
Yeah, so did I.
It's been a while. I remember. I mean, it's probably been 10 years.
No, it's been more than that for me. It's been.
I remember I got the DVD. They had the special DVD around the 60th anniversary, and watched it then after I got that. I know it's been a couple times since then I've watched it. Yeah, it's fun. It's not necessarily a movie that I necessarily see on TV a lot, where I just kind of stay and watch whatever comes next.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a movie that can be shown on TV without heavy edits.
That's true. It's a movie sometimes where you might see clips of certain things within specials, I guess. But I remember watching it in theaters. I remember when it came out, and my friend Jason, at that time, I guess I was going into high school. And he was talking about, oh yeah, there's new Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg movie, and it's about them searching for this soldier during the World War II. And then I remember the news just kind of talking about how graphic that the D-Day invasion is, right? And yeah, I went to see it. And I remember it was a big deal because like they were actually requiring parents to sign tickets if
the person was underage.
If they work in a company into the movie, they had to sign the ticket that it was okay for you to go in to see this movie.
Yeah.
Right. I went with him and Kyle Bradford. It was the three of us. And I remember at the end of the ending the opening sequence, Kyle snuck in the Pepsi. The theater's quiet. He brought out the Pepsi. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I definitely remember seeing it, at the theater, at Regal in Countryside.
See, I didn't see it in the theater. First time I saw it was after it came out on video.
Okay.
I was at a friend's house. There were a group of us there, and we were watching it. He was like, "We gotta watch this. We gotta watch this movie. It's great.
It is great."
Yeah, they're like, "This opening scene is amazing. It's so graphic, and that guy's looking for his arm."
Like, that's so cool, so fun. No, it's
It's not cool. It's not fun. But
No, it's not. I mean, like, it's fun. Like, I've seen other war movies, right, that are very unsettling to watch as well, that I don't ever care to watch again. In particular, I think of Come and See. But yeah, this one again, it's a hard watch, but I could watch it again.
yeah,
It's not a fun watch. And it's a movie that straddles that line, that shows the horror of war. It shows that it's hell.
but then there's also
also
some
shows
uplifting scenes. There's
Yes.
some lighter scenes in there in the middle of war.
and there's uplifting stuff, or that's I know some people like to say that sometimes it gets too sentimental. I don't think it ever veers into it being like a fake sentimentality.
No. Oh no. No,
I think all of it's genuine and earned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they allow to be times where there's some humor, right? They do the best they can, and it's I think what's good about it is that I think sometimes we can I think you are well aware of the horror of war, but sometimes especially with World War II, we could put this kind of sheen on it that, okay, they're fighting the Nazis. It's kind of rah, right? It doesn't have any of kind of the controversy that you would have with like Iraq or Vietnam, right? And so you can just kind of think of everything being, like guns blazing. And you kind of forget that at the same time, these guys were essentially, they're still traumatized about what war is, right? And there's a few characters that definitely, exemplify that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a stark reminder that even in times when the war can seem justified, it's brutal and it's hard.
Yeah.
And it leaves sometimes, on every soldier, whether, even if they don't come back with some of the mental scars that others do, there's still, it leaves a wound.
Yeah, definitely.
And, there's a lot that we could say about it. And I'm sure as we get into some of the scenes and talk more about some of the characters, we can kind of dive into that a bit more.
Yeah. So, do we want to go ahead and dive into it?
I will say before we do that, it's another John Williams movie as well. So
yes, it is.
With a very different score than sometimes we kind of associate with them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you have a typical Spielberg collaborators. It's actually the first time that Tom Hanks and him would collaborate.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the last.
It would not be the last. But yeah, I think with that, we can probably jump into it.
All right. So, as always, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about this entire movie, beginning, middle, and end. So if you have not seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, then pause the podcast, watch the movie, come back and listen. If you have seen the movie or you just don't mind being spoiled, then keep on listening. But you have been warned, this movie will be spoiled.
Again, it is almost a 30-year-old movie at this point.
Yeah.
And plenty of it has been shared on various memes or social media posts, and many of these actors have become more famous.
Yeah.
And so you might be well aware of what happens, even if you have not seen the movie.
Yep.
But it is worth seeing, especially with D-Day coming soon as well. So,
yeah. It's definitely, it's worth watching.
It's
if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it.
I am still bitter that it lost to Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah.
Best Picture.
I think everybody's bitter about that.
That was I was shocked when that happened.
And that's one of the biggest Oscar controversies out there.
Yes. Tom Hanks was nominated for Best Actor, which was rightfully so, and he lost Roberto Benigni, but he had recently won 2 times, so I could understand at that point them saying, you know what, someone else can win.
Yeah.
Spielberg did win Best Director though, so
yeah.
But anyway, so the movie does not begin though at over. Well, it does begin in Europe, but it does not begin in 1944.
No,
it begins present day.
It begins present day at Arlington National Cemetery.
I actually think this is actually back over in Europe. I think it's at the cemetery in Normandy.
Is it? Okay. Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'll
Well,
take a look.
either way,
Anyway, you describe the scene. I will
it
verify.
starts out at a military cemetery, whether it's Arlington or over at Normandy. And we have an old man walking, down the sidewalk through the cemetery with his family following close behind. And we don't know who this old man is just yet.
Yeah. Like I said, his wife is there, and there's looks like his kids, and then his grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, it is the Normandy American Cemetery where this takes place.
All right. I stand corrected. So they're at the Normandy American Cemetery. And, as they're walking through the cemetery, he, walks up to one of the graves.
Right. I like, you look at it and, you have the white, like, gravestones that you kind of associate with the military cemetery, right? And some are crosses, some have the Star of David, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, he walks up to one in particular.
Yeah, we don't see whose it is. But he walks up to one in particular and, just sort of just says, I don't remember. He doesn't say anything just yet, does he?
He doesn't say anything yet.
Yeah.
He gets a bit emotional.
He gets emotional.
And you hear like his son kind of comes up. He says like, "Dad," right?
Yeah.
His wife kind of comes up, and I think he kind of falls to like a knee or right, and he stands back up, and then like the camera just kind of
zooms
pans in
on
his
face,
face.
He's just got this
in contemplation. You can just see he's thinking.
He's got this look on his face that he's remembering. So it sort of zooms in on his face, and then it cuts to a flashback to D-Day,
to the Atlantic Ocean,
mm-hmm.
right? And you have the different boats, and you can kind of see the beach, and then it cuts to Tom Hanks, who plays Captain John Miller, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, granted, right, it doesn't cut directly to his face, right? You have other scenes, so it cuts it in a way where you think it might be him,
mm-hmm.
but might not be him, right? Yeah. And and you look at him, he's got his little canteen, and he's getting some water, right? But his hand is like trembling. He's got a tremor,
yeah,
right. Right. And then he gives, he starts just kind of talking to his men, right? You can see that he's a captain. He's got his helmet on. He's got a little symbol that shows he's a captain. And he's just kind of telling them, like, the orders and what they need to do once they get out the boats. And I mean, they do it right away. It's interesting because, like, the first scene, it's set present day, and it's kind of, they set it with a kind of somber tone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's already tension filled, and obviously you know what's coming, right? It does a good job of staying kind of just tight within the boats as they're just kind of sitting there and they're waiting, and like they're about to storm this beach,
mm-hmm.
where there's going to be just a bunch of enemy combatants shooting them with machine guns.
Yeah, it's not just, rowing your boat up to the beach and getting out and, enjoying the sun. It's, they...
No.
There are German soldiers all over this beach.
We see a few of them before, like, the doors open, before they get to the shore. Like, they like vomit over the side, right?
Mm-hmm. Because they know as soon as these ships open up, as soon as these boats open and they can get out of there, they're going to be under fire.
Right. You got to think about, like, in a situation like this, especially the ones that are at the front of those boats, like,
mm-hmm.
right. They're going to be some of the first ones that, like, yeah. And I think it is a good job of, again, like, obviously they focus on, Captain Miller, and it's Tom Hanks. So you know that he's most likely safe for the time being.
Yeah, for the time being.
Right. But
I mean,
everybody else though,
he
it's
is
open
top
book.
billed.
And, yeah. Samuel L. Jackson was top billed in Deep Blue Sea.
True, but he also lasted longer.
Spoiler
than 5
alert for
minutes.
Deep Blue Sea.
But Samuel L. Jackson also lasted longer than 5 minutes. So
Yes, yeah, he did. He lasted half the movie. But no, obviously, if you'd seen the TV spots and the trailers, you obviously would know that.
You know that Tom Hanks
survives that. So, but the rest of them, like, yeah, they just do a good job. You just look at them; they're just random soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
They're about to face absolute horror, right? And like, yeah.
And so
he gives them a few quick instructions, right? He's like, keep the sand out of your weapons, right? And I'll see you on the beach.
Mm-hmm. Keep the action clear.
Yeah. Right. Then the ramp goes down, and then all of a sudden, like, all hell breaks loose for the next 25 minutes.
As soon as that ramp goes down on those boats, that's when the machine gun fire from the beach starts up. And it just, all those people they're in the front of the boats just get just shot up and
they're killed. Right. And then you see others that are just going over the side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Miller,
right?
Tom Hanks, orders his men, go over the sides.
Yep.
Because if they try to go out on the ramp, then they're going to get shot.
Yes.
So, they're jumping over the side, and, you got people underwater. They're dropping all their gear so that they don't sink.
Yeah, because they got all this heavy gear, and, like, again, like, they're still far enough out that they could drown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then
if the gear drags them down,
you get bullets coming into the water, whizzing by, hitting some people, and right? People thought they were safe.
You start seeing some people that were hit that were like the front, and they're just kind of laying there in the water, and their blood's just flowing out, right? And so everyone's trying to struggle to get onto the beach.
And there's even one guy. There's even one guy in there that wasn't able to get his gear off in time, and he drowned.
Right, and he drowns. So
yeah. So right away, it doesn't waste any time showing you the brutality of war.
It doesn't. Right. It's in Miller grabs one soldier. His name's Delancey, played by Adam Shaw.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and he's like kind of shot in the leg, and Miller's able to kind of drag him on the beach, and they can get they get some like brief refuge, and then he's thanking Miller, right, and then he ends up getting shot, and killed, right? It's like, and there's gonna be a lot of instances just like this, right, where you have
talking to someone in 1 second,
seeming like they survived, and then they die.
Yeah.
You even get one of his, I guess, really, was it Lieutenant Briggs, which is kind of like his second in command at this point, right?
Yeah.
He kind of gets wounded, and they're kind of, again, he's kind of trying to drag him to safety, and then a mortar shell falls, and knocks him off, and then Bill, he tries to keep dragging him, and he looks behind him, and he's been blown in half.
Yeah.
Right.
And you've got, a group of medics all around Giovanni.
They're all around. They're trying to help.
But they're all trying to help this one guy. And, one of the medics has, bandages, and he's pushing on the guy's chest. He's like, I stopped the bleeding. As soon as he stops the bleeding, the guy gets shot in the head.
Yep. And it goes straight through his helmet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's like, and he's just screaming like the soldiers. Even obviously the soldiers can't hear him. Like, damn you can't give us 1 minute.
Yeah.
To even try to help people, right? And then there's a scene there where you get Miller, and he's kind of shell shocked a little bit, and he's looking around them, and he's seeing the carnage and the chaos.
Yeah.
And there's you have one of the soldiers. It's he's got the flamethrower. He's been hit, and he's been he's on fire, right?
Yeah, because the
guys are trying to
hit the pack. They
extinguish them, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned the guy that his arm had been blowing off, and he's just walking around looking for his arm,
and
he finds it, and he picks it up like it's nothing.
Finds it, picks it up. He's just holding onto his sleeve and just keeps walking and just oblivious to what's going on around him because he's in shock.
Right. And he's a good example. Like, does he end up getting hit with something because he's just kind of walking around, standing out in the open like that? Or maybe he doesn't.
Yeah.
And then maybe he doesn't die of blood loss. Right. Yeah. And he survives and
makes it back to
because his arm's blown off, he gets taken out of the war and he lives the rest of his life with one arm. We don't know. Right. It's just there's so many little cases like that. So they finally they keep trying to move their way slowly up the beach. Oh yeah, and then it's just one guy. He's there, his guts are spilling out, and he's just calling for his mother.
Yeah, he's just yelling, "Mommy, mommy!" And then they get up a little further on the beach, and they're at this, and it's this little berm.
Several other of his men, they're up there, and they're kind of towards the bluff of the beach, right?
Yeah,
they're
first thing
not far from where they're firing all the machine guns.
Yeah, and first thing that Miller asks, when he gets up there, he yells out, "Who's in charge here?" And one of them says, "You are, sir."
Right.
So,
and he sees a radio man there, right?
Clearly, Miller's superiors
he's looking around,
been out of the action.
He's seeing that they haven't had much control of the beach, and so he's just trying. He's relaying to the radio man to go back, radio back, what's happening at their position, right? And it's they're going back and forth about things,
and then he turns to.
He says the first wave was ineffective. We don't hold the beach. We do not hold the beach, right? And that they say all the units are mixed up, right? Yeah. And he tries to a little bit more.
He turns to talk to Tom Sizemore.
The radio man doesn't respond.
Yeah, and so he turns for 2 seconds, right? Because he's talking to the radio man, and then he turns to talk to Tom Sizemore, and then he turns back, and all of a sudden the radio man's got no face.
Yeah, and the radio's destroyed.
Yeah,
so now he can't even relay.
So Miller picks up the radio and he's trying to talk, and you can see on the radio there's a big hole in the back from where it got shot.
Yes,
and he's trying to talk into it, and nothing's happening. And then he realizes, the radio got shot.
So that's when Tom Sizemore's with him now, and Tom
Sizemore plays Sergeant
his
Horvath.
character is Sergeant Mike Horvath, and then we see a few of the other of their men. Private Rabin, who was played by Edward Burns. Private Mellish, played by Adam Goldberg. Private Caparzo, played by Vin Diesel. Right, and then you have one of the medics that's around there is his last name is Wade. That's Giovanni Ribisi, right? So there's another guy that's kind of there with them, right? He gets shot in the head. He's got his helmet on, right?
Yeah, and it glances off of his helmet.
It stops it. It ricochets off.
He's like, "Whoa!"
But obviously the forces it off, and he looks at it as it's in his hand.
Oh no, he doesn't. He doesn't force it off. So it hits his helmet. It's a glancing blow on his helmet, and he's just shocked that it didn't go through the helmet. So he takes it off and sort of feels his head, just making sure that the bullet didn't go through the helmet. And then when his helmet's off,
then a bullet goes through his head.
So it's it's they don't waste any time, showing just the brutality of this stuff.
So Mellish eventually grabs Wade to bring it up to the little hill that they're kind of positioned behind, right? Because it's futile what he's doing out there. They might need him. They don't want him exposed out in the open.
Yeah.
when they might need additional aid. So in the middle, he's looking at things like he's telling them they need to grab some weapons, right? And like look for those that are wounded or dead, and just take what they have, right? So at this point, Private Jackson shows up with them. That's Fury Pepper, who will be the as you would discover later, is the sniper for the group, right? And they're able to get some Bangalore torpedoes to start firing up at the Germans, right? So, and they're able to kind of, hit them for a little bit, but they need to still be able to kind of get, a full view that's just start firing on them. So I like how, Tom Hanks, right? He's able to, he's got like a stick and a little mirror, right?
Yeah.
He has to get some gum, right, to attach the mirror, so he can kind of it's almost like a rear view mirror to kind of get a good sense of what they're going to be up against.
Yeah, without exposing himself.
Yeah. So, he sees kind of how many men and the different weapons, and they're going to need to have some cover fire so they can kind of get out there and then start actually shooting, at them to kind of expose the trench and the area where the Germans are. So, they're able to kind of get through that, and they're able to kind of get, they work they can just continue to drudge their way up the best that they can.
Yeah,
and then they can actually get into some of the trenches and the bunkers that the Germans are actually hiding out.
Yeah, so they're able to get, to the edge of one of the trenches and create a distraction for the Germans to actually come out, so that they can sort of pick them off as they're coming out of the door of the bunker, and then they send their flamethrower in there.
Yep.
To take out the rest of the interior of the bunker. And so once they're able to get some of these bunkers out of the way, then that particular part of the fighting is able to stop. But there's these two, after they take out a couple of bunkers, and there's these two soldiers, these two German soldiers that, they're
trying to surrender.
They're trying to surrender. They got their hands up and they're, yelling something, and the Americans don't understand what they're saying. They think they're just
so
German soldiers, so they shoot them.
They shoot them dead.
But what they were is those two guys were Czech, which they were speaking Czech. They were saying, "I'm not German. I am Czech. Don't shoot me." And they were just repeating that over and over because the Germans would take some of their conquered people, and they'd throw uniforms on them and put them out on the front lines.
Yep.
And this just happened to be a couple of those people. That they were fighting because they were forced to.
One of the Americans that shoots him is like, he looks up, he's like, like, oh, what did he say? He looks, it's like, oh, like, I washed for supper.
Yeah. Now look at me, I washed for supper. Yeah.
And then Hank sees this. He looks kind of disgusted by it, right? Well, it's actually kind of an important scene because it kind of harkens towards something that will happen later.
Yeah.
In terms of what do you do in these situations?
Yeah.
Right.
Because there are rules to war.
There are, yes. Right.
I mean, that seems like it sometimes,
but
there are
get,
rules of war.
Caparzo, right? Again, played by Adam Goldberg, right? He finds
Caparzo is Vin Diesel.
One of the soldiers that's died.
Mellish. Mellish is Adam Goldberg.
Caparzo finds the knife. That's right, and he gives it to Mellish. Sorry. Off one of the dead soldiers. Yeah. And it's a Hitler Youth knife.
Yeah.
Right. And Mellish just chokes. Now it's a Shabbat Hala cutter.
Yeah. Yeah,
Again, like even at the end of all this, there's a little bit of
a little
levity.
bit of levity, and it's fitting,
But
that Mellish is the one that says it, because Mellish
he's Jewish.
is the Jewish member of their squad.
If you weren't familiar by the last name Goldberg,
Yeah,
but um, but even after he says that, with he kind of says it with a little bit of a laugh, and then he just breaks down.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right? But, you have all this. Horvath, then he looks around. He's kind of like glum about it. And he picks up some dirt and he puts it in a little tin that's marked France, right? And then he puts it in his little bag, and he has one that says Italy, and I think, was it Tunisia?
something like that.
So it was North Africa, right? Right. And then finally, get back to Captain Miller. He's got his canteen, his hands shaking again, right? And he's just getting some water. And Horvath looks at him. He's like, "That's quite a view." Like, yes, it is, right? And he just stares out at the beach, right? And he's
just kind of
see that, at least that there, and if you're not familiar with like D-Day, like Omaha Beach is one of the toughest sections to like take.
Yeah.
So he's obviously only looking at Omaha Beach in their section, having no idea how the rest of this is gone.
Yeah.
At other ends of the beach, right?
But yeah.
But he looks out, and he's just looking at the carnage and the aftermath. And
yeah, so the camera's just panning across the beach. It's just showing the devastation of what just happened. And, just panning over, fallen soldiers and all that. It sort of stops on this one fallen soldier who's on his stomach. He's got a backpack on. And at the bottom of the backpack is stenciled Ryan S. And it kind of just sits on him for a few seconds. And then it cuts back to America.
Yep. And we're back, we're stateside. Like you said, we're back in America. And there's just a bunch of ladies there at typewriters. Mm-hmm. And they're typing, and it's kind of voiceover, and it's like, saying, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so.
I regret to inform you.
Like your son or your husband, right? Obviously, you get a sense of what it's about.
Yeah.
And we finally, and we
get one of them.
It settles on one of them.
And she...
Valerie Colgan, who was actually in Aliens, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? And she looks at one of the names, and she's like, you can see, like, she's like thinking really hard on what she's looking at.
And so she runs up, and she's checking a book. She's, flipping through a binder, and, see somebody gets, surprised, and, she
runs over to someone else's, station, right? And starts flipping through her book. And it's the same thing. And she like kind of takes the paper out, and she's got these 3 papers. She goes into like her supervisor's office, right?
And this is Bryan Cranston.
Yeah. He's like, it's like sure about this, and like, yes. So, 2 of them, they move on, and it goes up the chain of command, so to speak, right? Yeah. And so finally you get to General Marshall, right? And in this movie, General Marshall is played by Harve Presnell, who, if you've seen Fargo, you would know as William H. Macy's father-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's this whole discussion there about what should they do?
What should they do? And because
some of them was like, we don't even know that he's alive. Right? Like, and they find, they kind of briefly discuss him. It's like, he's a paratrooper. They were supposed to
first they
land
hand
behind these lines.
First they hand him the papers, and they're like, read these.
Right.
Read these names, and like Sean Ryan, David Ryan, These are
Like
all,
two of them were killed there, like
yeah, two of them
in
were
Europe,
killed.
and the one was
Yeah,
killed over in the
like
Pacific.
yeah. So yeah, two of them were killed on D-Day at different beaches, and then the other was killed like a week before in the Pacific. And yeah, so they're like these are three brothers. They have one more brother. Their youngest brother was in the 101st Airborne. And he's one of the people that dropped the night before.
Right.
That parachuted in the night before.
And the point they made is like, we don't know if he made that jump, if he survived the jump, right? And then B, like, even if he made the jump and like at the spot where they were supposed to be.
Yeah, because
they're saying like we don't even have
planes,
we don't have any reports from them yet from that airborne.
Yeah,
their positions are probably scattered.
Yeah,
right.
So for all we know,
so we don't even know where they might be.
They're like, so they're having this discussion of what they should do, because at this point their mother is getting 3 telegrams,
right,
and they don't want her to get a 4th one.
No.
Because that's all of her sons.
Yes.
And so, yeah,
I mean, these are real situations that have happened within the U.S. military.
Yeah. I mean, this exact situation is what, created the current day, Private Ryan clause or whatever it's called in the military, where if there are brothers that are enlisted, if it gets down to the last brother, they won't let him enlist because his other brothers are already there, and they don't want to have to if things go bad, then they don't want to have to report to the parents that all of their sons are dead.
Right. So what ends up happening is, Marshall, the general, right? He goes over, he has, he brings out this letter that's kind of, he has like locked away, right? And he starts reading it, right? And there's, I would, opinions are split about what they should do. It's like, you need to hear me out. And it's essentially very much a similar letter that Abraham Lincoln wrote to a grieving mother, right? And he just simply says, like, Private Ryan is alive, and we're going to find him. We'll bring him home, right? And that's that, right? So then we finally cut back to, well, we do get the scene, right? It's Private Ryan is from Iowa, right? And we have a scene, right?
James Francis Ryan.
This farm, it's this classic looking Midwestern farm, right? And there's a house there, and there's this long driveway. And there's a woman. She's doing dishes in the kitchen, and she can look over at this long driveway. And she just looks up, and she sees this army car start driving up, and she knows what that means.
Yeah. So she walks over to the front door, and an officer gets out, and then a priest gets out, and she just drops to her knees. And she's just sitting on the porch, just crying, just in shock. And they, so they come up and they sort of sit with her, and they're, and talking to her. We don't hear what they're saying.
We don't hear anything they say.
But
so, we don't even hear, like, this point, like that, the conversation that, 75% of her kids, right? She's got one left, and they obviously, don't know where he is, right? And that is Amanda Boxer plays Ryan's mother. She is credited as Mrs. Margaret Ryan. So we have what Bryan Cranston was one of the colonels that was in the War Department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the
Dale
War Department
Dye
colonel.
was also in that scene. David Wohl and Eric Lauren. David Wohl, if you're familiar with Revenge of the Nerds, is the dean in that.
Mm-hmm.
He was also in Hot Shots Part 2.
Hot Shots Part 2.
So anyway, so we get back to Normandy. We have Miller. Now he's talking with like his commanding officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Played by Dennis Farina.
Yep.
And they're just talking about how there's still so much that they don't know, and that things didn't go the way that they planned, but he's also commending him for the job that he's done.
Mm-hmm. And then he's like,
Lieutenant Anderson is Dennis Farina. That's his character.
Lieutenant Colonel Anderson. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah,
he has another job for him.
Yeah, he has another job for him, and we don't hear exactly what that job is yet. But Miller is like, that's impossible. There's that's going to be way too difficult, for somebody to go do, and so yeah.
So he's like, well, that's why I need you to do it.
That's why I'm asking you. That's why I'm sending you.
So, next thing we have, Miller, and he's talking with, Horvath. And Horvath's like, again, he's like, how are we going to do this? Right. He's like, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And Miller's like, no, it's like finding a needle in a stack of needles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then he just talks about, who he wants for this, mission. Right. And they go through, and then finally he's like, I can use this other guy, to be my translator. It's like, no, he didn't make it.
He didn't make it. What about this other one? We need the guy that speaks French. Like, no, he didn't make it. Okay, well, what about the one that speaks German? Yeah, he didn't make it either. Okay, so we need to find a new translator.
Yes.
And so they go over there and they find Jeremy Davies, Corporal Upham.
Jeremy Davies.
And, he
right. And again,
speaks French and German.
And obviously he's going to be a very different type than some of the other privates that are going to be there, because he's an educated man.
Yeah, he's an educated man. He's more of a bookish type of person. Right. And, he's got a typewriter that travel typewriter that he carries with him.
He's not going to carry with him now.
Nope.
He's going to carry his pencil.
Yep.
Right.
But yeah, so.
And, Miller asks him, like, how's your German? He's like, oh, it's perfect. He's like, how's your French? Like, almost perfect.
Yeah. And then he's like, have you ever fired a weapon? Like, in basic training.
He's kind of like Nicolas Cage's character in The Rock.
Yeah, but later on, not to give away too much.
Not to give away too much
time.
He
later on, he's definitely not like Nicolas Cage in The Rock.
He's not.
He's a bit more cowardly than that.
Yes,
quite a bit more cowardly. But like, we'll get there, but to the point where
we'll get that.
Yeah,
there's a lot to say that. Let's say with that. But.
So anyway, he's like, "Can I bring my typewriter?" Yeah, he picks it up. He picks up the case, and it falls out of the case. He's like, "Yeah," and he gives him a pencil. He's like, "You can take this." And so, but he's still carrying the case, the empty case of the typewriter, and his big pack, and as he's starting to walk away with Miller stops him. He's like, "Well, here, first, you don't need to take these with you." He just throws them on the ground.
Yep. Throws
the case and the pack on the ground. Like, Yeah, he's like, oh, these things are so heavy. He's like, oh, well, you're in luck because you don't have to carry them. He just tosses them on the ground.
And again, he's thinking about like, oh, everything he needs. He's been very bookish about it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, he's obviously not he's someone that got, didn't have to go at the beach, right? No, right? He got flown there afterwards to do what was needed to do, right? To translate. Now, he's gotten this detail, and he does not know what to expect. And, there's going to be a certain that he's going to experience ultimately a loss of innocence.
Yeah, and so Miller assembles this team of 8,
and right away, like most of them, are like, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're going to risk our lives for this guy to get so he can go home.
Yeah.
Like, what about our mothers?
Yeah, what about our mothers? Yeah.
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you think about like, someone, she's already laid 3 children at this altar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a legitimate question to bring up and ponder and think about.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about themselves, and I mean, like they could just as easily die doing something else in the war than saving one guy, But and again, like you think about why has he earned the right to go home when they haven't?
Yeah.
And this is what gets to, as we talked about earlier, when they're the pre-production in Spielberg, but basically everyone else did like basic training, and he excluded Matt Damon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And so this group of 8 that he puts together,
it's a group of 8.
Consists of Miller,
and then
Horvath, Rabin, Jackson, Mellish, Caparzo, Wade, and Upham.
This is the 8 of them. And I would say like Rabin's probably the most outspoken against this.
Yes.
Edward, that's played by Edward Burns. He's the one that's going to be the most vocal against it. So, we talked about what was Barry Pepper's character's name again?
Private Jackson.
Like he's a sniper. He's also a Christian, right? So you'll see, we've already heard where he'll quote the Bible, the King James Bible, at times when he's sniping. And so, right, and we don't get huge, we get small character insights. Again, whether like the Jewish or Christian or bookish, right? Into kind of an insight on this, right? Even like Horvath, right? We don't have a whole lot on him, but like just the fact that he's taking the earth from each place that he's fighting, packing it up to bring home, right? So obviously they agree to the mission, and and so it's funny, like they're walking along, and you kind of have kind of like typical type of shot where you have a small group like this, right? Where they come over the hill, right? We've seen it in Lord of the Rings. We see it here, right?
We've seen it in Band of Brothers. We've seen it, just about any war movie, especially.
Yes. But, well, we haven't really even discussed that, how influential this movie is on war movies. Yeah. When you take a look at any war movie that's come out in the last 25 years,
including
is using a lot of the techniques, particularly the D-Day invasion. Yeah. To kind of go for that realistic feel.
Yeah. And that's all including, one that we did a little while ago on the podcast, Rogue One. They use this movie heavily as inspiration.
Absolutely. So they're talking, and Jimmy Davies, he's in Cornish. He's trying to get to know these other guys, right? Because they're all part of the same group, right? Yeah, they're Rangers. They're Army Rangers, by the way. I don't think we've
they are
actually specified that.
No,
yet.
We haven't. But yeah, they're Rangers.
So, and he's really also interested, especially in like Miller, about like what's he about, and they're all kind of laughing at him.
Yeah,
right. It's like, oh no one knows about him, right? Is kind of the line on him. So it's like, yeah. Oh, how about you ask him, right? Ask him what he did before this, right? Before the war. So they eventually they come up to this town, in Newville, right? And there's some troopers there, airborne troopers there from the 101st.
Mm-hmm.
And they're led by Paul Giamatti, the small group with Sergeant Hill, right? But they're kind of cut off, right? Because the Germans still mostly have control of this little town, right? And this voice that's on the radio, right? Is some German soldier just speaking over on the radio. And Paul Giamatti, he makes a little kind of joke about who he is, like Captain Dusseldorf or something like that, right?
Something.
But yeah, they're going to kind of band with them to kind of get towards the rest of the unit to see if there's a Private Ryan there, or if there's anyone that knows who Private Ryan might be, right? Because the 101st Airborne, it's a large division, and not everyone's going to know every single person within that unit. So they're going along, and then one of the guys that's in the airborne, right? He gets shot as they're going across. Oh, by a sniper. That's right. Yeah, a sniper shoots one of them.
No, so this part, no, they meet up with Paul Giamatti and they find out that Ryan's not with them, and then they go on their way. Because the sniper doesn't show up until after they find the family.
Yeah, because they find the family.
So
that's right. Yeah, that's right. It's when they find the family. That's right.
So they're in this area where like
they find the family. The family's going to trying to give their daughter to the soldiers, right?
To Caparzo. And they're this
Caparzo is happily accepting him.
So this house this house
they're telling them
out.
Not to. It's bombed out.
It's missing the walls and all that. So the family is standing on the second story floor, and they're trying to hand their daughter down to Caparzo, and he's happy to accept the daughter because it reminds him of his niece.
Right.
She reminds him of his niece, and so it's like he takes her down in his arms, and
everyone else is telling him like, no, don't do this. And Miller's like, no, like you can't do this, right? And that's when Caparzo gets shot.
Well, he puts the girl down. And she runs over to Miller and them, she
that's right.
Doesn't know. He puts her on the ground, and then he gets shot, and then the girl runs over to Miller.
That's right.
And so he's laying on the ground, wounded.
He's laying on the ground. He's not dead yet.
There's a sniper,
and he's bleeding out.
Yeah,
and then they realize there's a sniper.
And so
he's trying to talk with them. He's like, because he's got a note in his, it's his dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to tell him like, you got to get this letter to my dad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm bleeding. You have to copy it. Like, I don't want to receive this letter that just has my blood on it. Right.
So everybody else is hiding behind a car.
They're trying to tell him to shut up.
Yeah. Everybody else is hiding behind a car. They can't risk going out to try to help him because there's a sniper. And it's fairly common practice for a sniper to do this kind of thing, injure one person and use them as bait to lure everybody else out. And so they're all hiding behind this car.
Thankfully, they have a sniper with them themselves.
Yes, they have a sniper with themselves, Jackson. So he kind of sneaks over.
Private Jackson, he's looking around.
He finds this little mound. And so they're looking around and they see this tower, this clock tower, or not clock tower, this bell tower across the way from them. And, he sees that. He's like, that's where I'd be. And so they figure the sniper's up there. So he kind of sneaks around the back of the car, finds this mound that he sort of hides behind, puts his scope on his rifle and, sits there and, is looking for this sniper. And so the sniper that's up in the tower, as he's looking around trying to find a shot, and he sees Miller's helmet just barely coming out of the out from behind the truck or the car. And so as he's trying to line a shot up, as he turns, then we get Jackson quoting scripture, quoting the Bible, and then he fires and he shoots right down this guy's scope and takes out that sniper before he can take Miller out.
Right.
So then, once the sniper's down, then they all rush over to Caparzo, but it's too late.
Yeah, he's gone. So they Wade takes the letter, and he's going to be the one that's going to hold on to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they go and they
transcribe
it. They take the little girl back to her parents.
And then, Miller's like, that's why we can't take children.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's raining also, right? It's while all this is happening. So, and there's a scene there. So, excuse me. It gets back with, Paul Giamatti, because after this, where he sits down against a wall, right? And it collapses.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of German soldiers.
Yeah.
Behind it, right? And so it's kind of like a standoff, and you got Davies. He's gonna try to
It's kind of like
he wants to translate it.
Yeah. So this kind of reminded me of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when they get in the fireplace and it spins around, and all of a sudden they're in the Nazi communication room.
I've never thought of that.
Paul Giamatti leans up on the wall, and the whole wall collapses, and there's just this room full of Nazis. They're all they're just standing there. They've all got their guns drawn, and they're yelling at each other, and yelling at each other to drop their weapons and all this, and they're at a stalemate. And then all of a sudden, there's gunfire, this automatic weapons fire, and all of the Germans just drop. They all drop dead. And then the camera kind of pans around, and there's a second, because they're kind of inside the bombed out building, right? And so there's a floor above them, behind them and above them. And there's this whole squad of American soldiers standing up there, that just took out all these Germans.
That's right. Right, because that's kind of like the rest of this airborne unit,
and
they're led by Ted Danson.
Yeah, they're led by Ted Danson.
Right, and so I guess so Ted Danson, he plays Captain Hamill.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of in charge there. And
And so Captain Miller's talking to Captain
he ends
Hamill,
up,
explaining what they're
they
there
kind of
for.
start talking, and he's like, he just tells him the mission.
Yeah.
And and then Hamill's like, yeah, like I wish sorry to hear about this. Like I could really use you. Right. It's like, it's like, I understand what you're doing. You should, should, definitely, be looking for this person. And then, they realize they have someone whose last name
someone in their unit with the last name Ryan. James Ryan.
So they find him and they bring him, and it's Nathan Fillion.
Yeah. Yeah, they find it's a James F. Ryan.
James, yes. James F. Ryan, yes.
And so, they bring Nathan Fillion up, and, he's, Miller calls him over, and he's like, I don't know how to say this. There's not really any good way to say it, but
your brothers are
dead. And so Private James F.
breaking
Ryan
down. It's like, I was supposed to take them fishing.
Yeah, he's like, how is that? He's like, how did they die? He's like, they were killed in action. He's like, how is that possible? They're still in grade school, or they're still in grammar school. And then Miller takes a second. He's like, are you James Francis Ryan? He's like, no, James Frederick Ryan. It's like, oh, we got the wrong. We got the wrong.
He's like,
Ryan.
No, I'm from Minnesota.
Yeah. Okay, we got the wrong Ryan. And
he's like, still
he's still
confused.
Devastated. He's like
devastated.
What about my brothers? Are they? Does that mean okay?
Miller's like, I'm sure they're okay.
He's like, I'm sure they're fine. He's like, but what if they're not?
It's like,
I need to get out of here.
Yeah. I need to go to my home. I need to go home. And he said, yeah, right. And so it's like, okay. And, they apologize, and Hamill's like, it's like, yeah, okay. Well, I can, you guys can stay here for the night and then head off in the morning. Right. It's like, but you need to go find him and bring him home.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of his directive. Right. And so, I don't know if, did we say it earlier? Nathan Fillion, he's actually credited as just Minnesota Ryan.
Yeah. He's credited as Minnesota Ryan.
And it's actually one of his first roles.
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up earlier today. And in terms, I think at least his first movie role, I think. Yeah, his first movie role. Well, I guess there was a movie called Strange and Rich, which he was in. So his second movie role. He'd been in a couple TV movies before this. So early Nathan Fillion before Firefly.
Yeah.
So So they settle in this, it's an abandoned church, right? Like we said earlier, like the house or the family was, right? It's like, the sides are blowing off, right? I always thought it was interesting. We didn't bring this up earlier, right? So after, they kill the sniper, they bring the daughter back to her parents, right? And the dad gives a hug her, and she's angry at dad.
Yeah,
she just starts slapping her dad. It's like, don't. Like that's a one angry French girl.
Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
She's going to be a lot to handle later in life. Anyhow, so they take refuge or sanctuary, if you will, in this abandoned church. And so, I forgot to mention earlier when they were first setting off, and they were talking about Miller. We find out that there is a pool going on.
Oh, yes.
About what Miller did in his previous life, so to speak, right? So, they're in this church up in Well, first Miller's talking with Horvath about how many men that he has lost, right? And he's talking about like 94 men that he could specifically count, right? But then he's talking to Upham. Upham's he's prodding, and he's like, finally Miller's like, well, what's the pool up to now?
Yeah, he's like, it's like $250 or something like that, and
like he's like, it's like, how about when we get to 500, I'll tell you,
then we
and
split.
then we'll split it, and then
Upham's like,
Upham's like, what about 1,000?
Yeah, he's like, well, I'd rather wait till 1,000. If we're gonna split it, I'd rather wait till 1,000.
Miller's like, what if we don't live that long? It's like 500's good. So, yeah, then we cut to the rest of the soldiers, and just talking, just kind of about life, right? Because you kind of wonder, like, how long have some of these guys really known each other? They're all privates. Because they know a certain amount about themselves, but probably not everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Wade's talking, right? He's copying Carparzo's letter.
Yeah.
Right?
And some of the guys are like,
his mom would work like night shift.
Yeah, because they're trying to. They're telling him that a couple of the guys are trying to sleep, but they can't. And he's like, the trick is to try to stay awake.
That's right.
You'll fall right to sleep. And then and then they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, my mom used to work. She worked as a nurse, and she would work during the night. She'd work all night and sleep during the day. And sometimes so the only time that we got to spend any time together was when she first got home from work before she went to bed. We'd have a little bit of time to be able to visit. And, so I would try to stay up so that I could see my mom when she got home. And anytime that I tried to stay awake, I'd fall right to sleep. And so he's like, that's the trick to falling asleep, is you try to stay awake.
And then these other times, I just fake it. She would come in, try to talk to me. I just pretend to be asleep. And he's looking. It's like, I don't know why I did that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's an implication here that his mother's dead.
Yeah.
Right?
It's never just outright said, but there's definitely an implication there.
So, it cuts, now it's, the next day and they're leaving. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. And when he's Miller's talking tonight again, you see his hand shaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which if you haven't gathered by now, is kind of a character trait that that will be visited multiple times throughout the movie, right? So they continue on, and they're able to get intel from some of the troopers there where the rally point was supposed to be for the airborne, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they get in there, and they find this field of these gliders that have landed or crashed. Oh, we can't forget this too. So back when they were first talking with Upham as they're leaving, and they're talking about the mission in general. They're saying the mission is FUBAR.
Yes.
And he's like, FUBAR? What does FUBAR mean?
Right? Who was it that he was talking to that told him what it was? Was it Jackson?
Well, he gets told later.
Yeah, later. Was it Jackson that finally told him?
No, it's
who was it?
Was it Jackson? I have some notes. It was Mellish.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because Mellish is going to give him ammo later.
Yeah, that's right.
So he could help resupply everybody later on in the movie.
Yeah.
So
he's basically wondering this entire movie what FUBAR means.
Again, he's a translator, so he's trying to figure out what this means, mm-hmm. Right? So he does not realize it's an acronym.
Yeah.
So they make it to the point, and they see these where these different gliders have landed or crashed, and they meet a soldier there, Lieutenant DeWint, played by Leland Orser, right? And so he tells him about how there's this brigadier general there was flying through, right? And he was, but because there's a general on this plane, right? They put extra weight on it, mm-hmm. which he wasn't aware of, which caused the plane to crash and kill a bunch of his men and the general, right? And so he's just, he's talking with Miller and the rest of the men about how, it doesn't seem like there's a full plan, that not all information is given, right? And it leads to men dying. And he says, it's all FUBAR. And, you see the other men are with him, yeah, mm-hmm. FUBAR, right? They all know.
Yep.
And Upham still doesn't know what FUBAR means.
Confused.
And then he just, he's like, yeah, no, I don't know Orion. But, I'll tell you what, I have a bag full of dog tags. Mm-hmm. It might be helpful to look through them just to kind of maybe get a confirmation if maybe he's died, right?
Yeah. So a bunch of the guys, they, go sit down at some little tables and, they dump the dog tags out and they're going through them and, they're kind of joking around and laughing and that's while they're going through these dog tags. And then,
he got what was Mellish was Jackson one of them? It was Mellish, Jackson, and it must have been Raven.
Yeah.
And then they're joking about it. And finally, Miller kind of goes through and he's looking through it too. He's not as enthusiastic as he looks mm-hmm. through them, right? Yeah. He's still looking and he's kind of he's a little bit of a smile on his face and some of the jokes they're making about it.
Yeah,
right?
But they're not just joking around, but they're also looking at him, looking at names, look at this guy's name. Look, what do you think happened to him? And they're being very disrespectful.
Right. Being very disrespectful. And you gotta put it back within their mindset is they're being put in a situation where they may not want to be. Mm-hmm. And they're blaming Ryan, but because they don't have Ryan, they're going to blame these other dead soldiers.
Yeah. Yeah. So as they're going through these dog tags and
joke or mock them.
Yeah. As they're going through these dog tags and, saying what they're saying and all this, then
there's all these other wounded soldiers
the
coming through and they're looking at it.
The rest of the squad that these dog tags were from. And, they're sort of walking around. They can hear everything that they're saying. And they're kind of just looking over at him. And then Wade sees what's going on. And he comes over and he grabs a bag and he just starts dumping all the dog tags into the bag. He's like, come on, guys. That's
treating some of the other wounded mm-hmm. guys are there, right? Yeah. And so he just stops whatever soldier he's kind of tending to, mm-hmm. right? He's like, no, you can't do this. This is disrespectful, right? And he's kind of getting angry at them.
This is these are their buddies. So he's just packing all of them up in the bag. He's like, well, let's go through these later. Be respectful.
And Miller kind of is like, no, you know what? He's not in here. Right. And there's a scene with Wade also. And I think it's right around here. I forget where it is, where he's talking with Raven. And he's telling him, he's basically trying to triage certain mm-hmm. soldiers, right? He's like, look at that guy over there. Look at his leg. Smell it and tell me if it smells like cheese, right? Mm-hmm. And he does it. He looks at it. He gets a look on his face, right? He's like, yeah, it smells like cheese, right? It's infected, right? So they kind of move on from the dog tags, and then at this point, then Miller he just starts screaming like, Ryan. like, Private Ryan, right? And there's one guy. It's like, oh wait, no, doesn't this guy know? He knew this Ryan. There's a guy named Ryan, right? And they bring up a guy, and it's like, yeah, no, like I think this guy might know who that is, and I have the character's name here, or at least I had a name. Yes. Oh, yes. Paratrooper Michelson, played by Ryan Hurst, who at the time, if you grew, we were probably in high school, college, or at the time, you would remember from Titan as Barry Butler. Anyway, it's like, oh yeah, I knew Ryan, but you look at him and you can tell like he's had like his right ear blown off, right? Or at least almost blown off. He's like, and he says like, oh no, you got to speak really loudly. Like,
yeah,
this grenade went off near my ear, and I can't really hear well on it, right? And so they they bring Uppen over because Uppen has a pencil and he's got the paper, right? And he's like, like write this down and show it to him, right? And it's like, it's like Private Ryan, right? From Iowa. And he came first, like, oh yeah, I know him. I flew in with him, right? And so they kind of continue the conversation. It's like, oh yeah, no, we ended over here, but then we got split up, and I believe he went with this group that was going to defend this bridge in this town called Ramel, right? So now they know where he's going to be, right? And so they tell him thank you, and they're going to head off to Ramel.
Mm-hmm.
They look at a map, and they realize that this is a town that has one of like the last remaining bridges that is kind of preventing like the Germans from taking over, a good portion of like France, right?
Yeah.
So they continue onward. But before they get, to Ramel, they stumble upon a machine gun nest.
They come across a machine gun nest, and they're getting shot at. They're trying to find cover.
And they figured like, well, we could move on. We can just try to get out of here, or we could take them out so that no one else, the next people that stumble upon this, aren't taken by surprise. And most of them, they just want to keep moving on.
Mm-hmm.
They want to leave it alone. But, captain's the captain.
Yep.
Right. So, he's going to get what he wants. So they decide to try to take it out. And so they go up towards it. And Uppen, he's the one that kind of stays back, and he's just kind of watching from a distance. Mm-hmm. The action of what's going on, right? Because again, he still really hasn't seen any action. He saw something basic.
Yeah, but that was
training. He hasn't seen anything yet. And even in this scene, you could tell, like, once he starts hearing the gunshots and the gunfire, he's not comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they're trying to fight this. They're trying to fight these Germans with the machine guns, and and Wade gets shot.
Yep. So I mean, they're able to shoot most of these Germans, but then Wade gets shot, and they start yelling down to Uppen to bring their supplies up, right? And Wade, he's bleeding out from his
Wade's bleeding out, abdomen. And so everybody's crowded around him trying to treat his wounds, but they're not medics. So Wade is trying to talk them through it.
Yes.
Trying to tell them what to do to save his life. And, like I said, none of them are medics, so they don't really know what they're doing. And they're not able to give him the care that he needs.
The care he's needed. And he kind of quickly realizes that, like his wounds are probably not survivable, and especially not with the men that he has.
Inexperienced.
No offense to them, right? That's just not how they're trained.
So, he's like, I want some morphine. And so Miller tells Horvath to give him some morphine, and Horvath's just like, no, we don't want to waste it.
They give it to him.
And like, give it to him.
And they request more, right? And they give him more, and they realize, you know what? He's their brother, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And they if this is going to help ease his pain, right? That's what they're going to do, and it's a tough moment because, you could, it's just this kind of reality that this guy that they love as a brother is just dead, and it's kind of crushing because it's just this realization that they could have moved on and be okay, but even if they did move, easily die the next day.
Yeah.
In this mission that they think is futile.
Yep.
And so they discover there is one German left.
Yeah.
And he's talking with Upham. And they nickname him Steamboat Willie.
Yes.
Because he talks about Steamboat Willie and a bunch of other American pop culture references.
Yeah. But
and he's trying to talk about them.
So he and Upham are like talking, and they're kind of like laughing with each other, and acting like they're all pals,
right?
Because they both speak German and they're communicating with each other, and
so no, then they bring him over. It's like, you're digging this grave, and so there's other. They discovered other American soldiers that were there that they've previously killed.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you're going to dig a grave for all of them. Yeah. And they're going to dig another grave.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's in there, and at this point, he's trying to say, after he's dug the graves, he starts singing the national anthem. He's trying to appeal to their good nature.
Because he knows what's happening next.
And then the last thing he can say when it seems like it's not going to work, he just says, "Fuck Hitler."
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, "Fuck Hitler. Fuck Hitler." And it's not having it. And then, but Upham intervenes. He's like, he's a prisoner of war. We can't just execute him.
Well, no, it's not Upham that says that. That's Miller.
Oh, that's Miller. That's right.
Yeah, because a couple of guys, they're ready to shoot him right there.
So he gets a blindfold and he puts it on his eyes, and he just starts walking him down this road.
So he tells Upham to translate.
He just says, you're going to walk down that for this long, and then you're going to turn yourself in to the next Americans that you see.
He's like, you're going to walk.
We're going to watch you. If you take that blindfold off, we will shoot you.
Yeah, he's like, you're going to just walk this direction for 1,000 paces. We'll be gone by then. And if you take the blindfold off, we'll shoot you. You're going to turn yourself into the first American squad you've come across.
It's like, we can't bring you with us. We don't have the capability, right? And now there's potential mutiny going on because Ryben just thinks, no, we need to kill this guy. Yeah. He just killed Wade.
But Miller's like, he's a prisoner of war. We can't just kill him. There are rules.
This mission doesn't make sense in the first place, right? And so he's about to walk off, and then Horvath, because he's a sergeant, he's the second in command. It's like, no, your captain said this. You're going to follow these orders.
So Horvath
right? And he draws a gun.
Yeah. He draws his 1911 on Raven. And
they start shouting at each other. And then Miller decides he needs to intervene. And he just asks, what's the pull up on me? Everyone's like, what?
Yeah. What's the pull up to? And so one of them says it, and then he reveals what he did before the war. He was a school teacher.
He's an English composition teacher at Thomas Alva Edison High School in Pennsylvania. And in the spring, he's the baseball coach.
Yep.
And he just says, like, yeah, you know, when I'm at home and I tell people what I do, like, yeah, that makes sense. But here, no one has a clue. And, you know, he just kind of gets into things about how tough war is. And if you think about it, right, he's a high school teacher, and you know, he's probably had plenty of men under him, right, that are just barely out of high school.
Yeah.
You know, fighting in this in hell with him. And then he kind of gets into kind of probably the most famous little, you know, segment or monologue or lines in the movie where he's like, yeah, sometimes I wonder if I've changed so much that my wife is she even going to recognize me whenever I get back? And how I can tell her about days like today. Ryan, I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. The man means nothing to me. It's just a name, right? Just like those dogs, like the dog tags, right?
Yeah,
they're just names. But yeah, it's just a name. But if you know, if going to Ramel and finding him so he can go home, if that earns me the right to go back to my wife, then that's my mission, right? Do you want to leave? You can go off and fight the war. I won't stop you. I'll put in the paperwork. I just that every man I kill, the farther away from home I feel.
And so in the original script,
that was using.
Yeah. So the original script, that speech was a lot longer. He had a lot more to say.
Okay.
And so, you know, when Tom Hanks was reading through it, he went to Spielberg and he's like, this character wouldn't go on this long. And Spielberg agreed.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, Spielberg
I think
agreed,
it's a good line.
So he shortened that speech, that monologue. And I think it fits a lot better with the way that it is in the movie than it would have been if it was longer. I think they made the right call on that one.
I just think, you know, it hits a lot of the right notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we haven't talked a whole lot about. I mean, we've talked about it, but like the purpose of the mission. Why is it? What is the mission that they're doing? Why is it that they follow that mission? Right. There's a lot that can be said about that. I don't think we need to go that deep into it. It's funny. Like I kind of think like, oh yeah, what's the mission? What is it that you're supposed to do? What is it that you're being asked to do? I always think about that with Lord of the Rings also. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's the whole thing, right? You know, you could go back and fight that war, and you might die anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it begs a question within that, right? You know, even if he goes back and he fights the war, and he's still fighting the Nazis, you know, and he dies, that's still an honorable way to die, right?
Yeah.
But or even within a special mission where you're going off to ease the pain of someone else that has sacrificed so much in that same fight, right?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, these are men that are also, you know, even within war, right? Some men will do things to sacrifice themselves or their own brothers that they fight along the side with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, you know, anyway, so after that, Raven, you know, he does not leave, and they continue on. So, yeah, they're going towards Ramel, and they're out in this field, and they hear this vehicle kind of approaching. And they get down, and Did they speak with it yet? How's that happen?
Um,
Or do they fire on it, or others fire on it? Yeah, because there's Germans on it, right?
yeah,
But then there's other fire that comes at it and destroys it.
yeah, and then they see that the ones that fired on it were this other group,
They're Americans.
Americans from the 101st Airborne. And so they're asking if they know Ryan, and one of them's like, yeah, he's with us. So he calls out, Ryan, and
It's like,
up walks Matt Damon.
well, they don't even call them out. Like they all introduce themselves to each other, and someone says like, "Oh yeah,
that's right.
I'm James Ryan." It's like, James Francis Ryan.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Are you from Iowa? It's like, yeah. How do you know? And they all look at him. They all kind of look glumly. And it cuts. Then now they're like Ramel. They're in the town, and they're giving him the information. It's like, yeah, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but your brothers are dead. It's like, and he looks at them. It's like, which ones?
He's like, all of them.
All of them. And it's like, well, and that's how. He's like, well, I don't know how, but it's told that they're all killed in action. And we have orders to bring you home to your mother. And he's still processing all this, right? And he's like, well, I still have my orders. These orders supersede that. I still have this. Like, he just tries to tell him like no again, and Ryman interjects like, "Hey, asshole, we've already lost 2 of our men trying to find you, right?" And
Ryan's like, "Go back. I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave."
Well, he asks what are the names, right? And Malice just, he gives him the names. He's like, well, I'm sorry about that, but I have my orders. You can go back because I'm not leaving. I have my brothers here. And one of the other, soldiers comes up and he's talking with one of the other guys. It's, he's kind of new in the situation. It's like, oh, yeah, Ryan lost his brothers. He's like, which ones? It's like, all of them. He's like, oh. And so, but they quickly realize like they're not going to convince him to come with them.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to figure out what to do. And he's just saying like, yeah, no, these are my brothers now. And I guess let's right. Mila says like, well, no, what are they going to tell your mother when they present her with another folded American flag? And he just says like, well, tell her that I died standing next to and protecting and fighting with the only brothers I have left.
Yeah.
So they realize, okay, well, we got to figure out what we're going to do here. They kind of have their own kind of discussion, and ultimately comes back with Horvath. Like, yeah, we could leave and go on with our next mission. We could stay here and fight with them, right? Because they're clearly outmanned where they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
With what they're doing, because again, the airborne's been scattered. They don't have the requisite troops there to help what they're supposed to do. So they could use the extra men.
Their tanks have been delayed.
That's why it takes them into lane. So, Horvat's like, we could stay here and fight with them, and you know, if we could, and maybe Saving Private Ryan could be the one decent thing that came out of all of this mess. So, that's enough to kind of convince Miller to, all right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to fight with them.
Mm-hmm.
We'll wait for the Germans to come, and if we can hold them off and Ryan survives and we survive, then we'll bring him home to his mother. Right? So then they give him the whole lowdown of the town.
Yeah.
And he's scoping it out, and he starts strategizing. Like, what are the Germans going to do? They go, no, what could they do? What will they most likely do? And how can we get them to do what we want?
Yeah, so there's this building right by the bridge, and he's like, see this building? This is the Alamo. We're going to funnel the Germans, toward the bridge here, but if everything goes to hell, then we
retreat back to the
Alamo.
And then we blow the bridge.
Yeah, and the last one here blows the bridge.
Right. And, they're trying to create a decoy because, like, there's a bunch of, this town's already seen plenty of bombing and action, right? Trying to funnel everybody in to the same point. Right. And then they'll do their best with the limited resources that they have to shoot, to attack them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he even talks about how they're going to use something called a sticky bomb.
Yeah. And
in which
one of them asked,
in their socks.
Yeah, he's like, what's a sticky bomb? And Miller's like, well, you take your standard issued GI sock and you cram it with as much explosives as you can. Cover the whole thing in engine grease. And then, make a simple fuse. When the tanks come up, you throw it and it sticks.
And they look at him, it's like, how do you learn about that? It's like, it's in the manual. Like, no, it's not. Like, no, it's in the manual. And sure enough, it's in the manual.
Yeah. So then, I forget which one it is. They're like, now we got to give up our socks for this guy?
Horvath seems to be okay with it because you see Horvath making the sticky bombs.
Yeah.
I think, Horvath's probably the one that likes the action the most, but so we get a whole kind of sequence again where they're just prepping for battle, for war, right? You're gonna get, they had there's a spot, there's a tower where you can snipe.
Yeah, where the sniper can go, and then so Miller's sitting here telling everybody where they're going to be. He's like, Jackson, I want you up in the tower. He's telling you're going to go over here. You're going to be there. You're going to be there. And then
Ryan, you're going to be no more than 5 feet from me.
No, Ryan's like, where am I going to be? He's like, no more than 2 feet away from me.
He's like 2 feet. Yes. Ryan's like, what? It's like, oh, Dad.
Yeah, so while they're preparing for all this, everybody's getting ready, getting into their positions, then Miller and Ryan are kind of just sitting there.
Well, before that, you have Mellish and Upham. They're talking.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. This is when Mellish
explains. Upham, he's going to be the one that's going to be going around and restocking everyone on their ammo, right? And Mellish is just trying to say, like, you need to be quick. We need to be able to make sure everyone reloads, and so to speak.
Yeah, because there's this building. They're up on the second floor. That's where they're putting up the 30 caliber machine gun.
Yes.
And so Mellish, opens up an ammo can and he takes the belt, the belt of ammo out and hangs it around Upham's neck, and so you're going to be bringing us ammo because Upham is the least combat qualified here. He's got the least amount of combat experience. So yeah, they're gonna have him run the ammo.
And so when they're talking, and you can tell like all of a sudden like, he's got a cigarette now, right? They're talking. It's like, yeah, no, I've never smoked one of these before. Now here I am, and Mel's just like they're looking. It's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, no, I be like this. You can tell like he's nervous about everything. And then, he's handing some of the rounds over to him. And he's just like, yeah, it's it's fucked up beyond all recognition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then up and looks like,
Fubar.
Right? He's like, yeah, I agree. So that's when we have the scene. There's a it really kind of cuts between the two scenes. You got Miller talking with Ryan, and then you got the rest of them kind of talking with each other.
Yeah.
Right? There's a phonograph, and it's playing Edith Piaf, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's "Tu es partout," right?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, Edith Piaf, like, been right around the time when she was like, super famous, and it's a whole other aspect of the war, that it's easy to kind of overlook, especially as Americans that were very separated from the action, right? But normal civilians that would have been, Poland and Netherlands and France and England and Italy, it was Spain. It was all very much in your face.
Yeah.
But it's this beautiful song. And
it's, of course, being sung in French. And so
Miller, he's explaining it to Ryan about what the song is about.
Yeah. He's playing
about, she is, singing about her, ex, lover, and how she still sees him everywhere she goes.
Yeah. And so while he's explaining this to Ryan, then Upham is translating it to everybody else.
And like everyone's captivated by the music because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And again, he's just kind of, like you said, transcribing it and saying like he's actually repeating kind of like the lines of what's actually being sung and said, right? And he's just kind of saying, he's just kind of repeating it that way. And you can tell like he loves this music and he likes hearing it and translating it for these men. Right. But that's when they can kind of cut back to Miller and Ryan. And Ryan's just talking about how
he can't see his brothers anymore.
He can't see his brothers' faces.
Yeah. He's trying hard, but he can't see their faces. And Miller tells him it's all about the context. Put context to it. And
Ryan's like, what do you mean context?
And so Miller's like, well, when I think about my wife, I don't just think about my wife. I think about a specific time. She's out working in her garden.
Specific time and like location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like she's working in her garden. She's pruning her rose bushes or, planting flowers, watering them, whatever it might be, right?
And so then Ryan's like, okay,
so,
I think I get
put
you.
that context and I can see her face as she's, I think about this action.
Yeah. So Ryan starts telling Miller a story about him and his brothers.
Now, one of them woke him up in the middle of the night and took them out to the family barn.
Yeah.
Again, we get some levity right now.
Yeah. So he's going through
I think Matt Damon is actually kind of a perfect actor to relay this type of story.
Yes. I agree. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, he's going on about how they take him out to the barn and all this. You just doing all this stuff, getting in trouble, basically.
Yeah.
And, one of them, it was his girlfriend that was out there with him and something
I don't know if it was a girlfriend, but just some other girl from town.
Yeah.
Was out there. And, she's up there, and his one brother is trying to, like, take off his shirt, right?
Yeah. And
there's like, if you think about it, like, she, was born in the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my other brother's trying to tell, him, like, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this.
And so this whole time that he's going through this, he just starts laughing.
He just starts laughing. He pretty much laughs his entire way through telling this story.
Yeah. And it's just, he's remembering this is a real funny story. It's a real just great memory that he has of his brothers.
I think the idea of it, it's not really said, is that his other two brothers woke him up to spy on the oldest brother.
Yeah, to spy on the oldest brother.
About to get lucky.
Yeah.
But then one of them shouts out to him, like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
And so this startles the girl, and she gets up, right? And I forget what it is. Why? Oh, yeah. I guess she had her glasses weren't on. And so she grabs up, she kind of she sits up and she kind of and then hits her face on something, right? Is that what he says?
Something like that.
And because she gets knocked cold. She's out. She's unconscious, right? And so the other brother, the oldest, is trying to fight the one of his younger brothers. He's like, why did you do that? Type of thing, right? And it's like, what do you mean? I just saved you.
Yeah, just saved you.
So he tries to punch his brother, right? And then, because again, this is like the 1940s. Like, they're not going to. This barn probably doesn't have any electricity. It's probably got candles and such in it, or kerosene, some type of lamp, like gas lamp, right? We almost end up setting the barn on fire.
Yeah,
because of trying to punch his other brother.
And
then, so he's laughing through the entire story, and he kind of gets to the end of that part,
and then
he just kind of stops.
He just stops,
and
laughing.
He's just thinking about it. It's like, wait, that was the last night we were all together.
That was the last night that we were all together a couple of years ago.
Because the oldest
before
shipped off then for basic
the next day.
The next day. This is probably why he was trying to get lucky. Right? So it's like, wow. Just thinking about it. And it's funny, you're getting these reactions, and slowly, Miller is starting to find some humor in the situation, right?
And then
he asks him, like, oh, well, tell me something about your wife and the rose bushes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, your wife in the garden. And he's like, no. He just flat out no.
Like, no, that one I say for myself.
That one I say for myself. And Ryan leaves it at that.
But then they start hearing, and all of a sudden you can kind of hear some vibrations, right? And you cut to the rest of the people, the rest of the men, and they're when they're listening by the record player, and they can kind of hear it too. Right.
And this whole time that the other men are talking, listening to the music, whatever. Horvath is sitting there. He's got his pistol in his hand. He's sitting on the steps, and he's just got his pistol in his hand. He's just holding it. He's ready for something to happen.
He's ready.
Whereas all the other guys, they had their pistols holstered. Some might be holding their rifle, but they're not wielding it.
Yeah, right.
But he's got his pistol in his hand, ready to go.
So, but they hear this. Yeah, which it would. Yeah, I like that. Again, it shows some of the realism, right? There's different reactions, different attitudes that they have. And I definitely think, and Horvath is one that's probably much more likely ready to go when he needs to.
Yeah.
So, but then, Jackson, though, he's not down there, right? He's up like in the tower.
Jackson's up in the tower.
Right? So Miller then, he looks at them, and he's able to signal about how many tanks they have and how many infantry they have, right? They have like 2 Panzers, 2 Tiger tanks, a bunch of infantrymen, right? And now they know it's time to go. So they get to their positions. And the first tank kind of comes through. It doesn't take the bait. It's going to go around the other end, right? Of town to get towards the bridge. But the second does, right? And this is the type of scene, like it's interesting because like you juxtapose this aspect where they're listening to this beautiful music, and then even like just this telling of this funny story that's happened to someone, right? Excuse me. And you quickly turn it into the scene now where like, okay, they're quickly gonna have to ready themselves for battle again.
Yeah. Yeah, you have this brief moment of levity.
So they get into position
again.
Right. Yeah. And even it shows how quickly that can get punctured, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they just wait. It's just like early in the movie. They're just waiting to get to the end of the beach. They open the doors, right? And they get a storm. This time they don't get. They're not the ones that storm. They're ready for them to come to them, but still they're waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hellish. And then they get close, and and that's basically when you get your another firefight. And they're getting shots. You got they had the machine gun. They got the machine gun where they're mowing a bunch of them down, and then you got Jackson. He's up there. He's shooting some from up the tower, right? And they're from their own positions where they're shooting, and they're doing whatever they can to take down as many people as possible.
And then as the tanks are starting to go by, they're using the sticky bombs.
The hope is to go ahead is to destroy the tanks. And from there, then they can get back to the position, and then on the other side of the bridge, right, and just mow them down. So, yeah, and they get to the point where they get to one of the tanks, and they get a sticky bomb on there, and it blows off the tires, the chains on the tank, right? But they still can't get an upper hand, right? They're vastly outnumbered, and they don't have the firepower, right? So we get Jackson. We see him taking out a bunch of different men, and they're able to actually even kill some of the guys in one of the Tiger tanks, and they get set on fire, right? But one of the other tanks finally they finally know where he is up there, and right, and they blow the tower.
They blow the tower up
with Jackson.
With Jackson, and there was 1 or 2 other guys up there too.
Yeah, some of the other guys that were already there with like Ryan's unit, right?
Yeah.
We see up him. He's going back and forth, trying to supply the ammo. But Ryan's giving ideas.
He's getting more and more
kind of
afraid. Like he goes and he ends up like cowering next to one of the buildings, just sitting there.
Yes.
Not going and taking the ammo to where they need it. And Mellish is up with the 30 caliber,
right? And
they run out of ammo. They run out of ammo for it, and so they're really needing the ammo that Upham has, and he's just sort of sitting next to a building, up against the wall, just afraid to go in.
Yeah. No, I mean it's basically what it is.
And then while they're while Mellish and the other guy that's up there with him,
he was one of the not the I guess probably the senior guy that was with Ryan's the unit there, right? As they're waiting for like reinforcements, right?
They hear footsteps coming up the stairs.
They're kind of in the same room together, and
they hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and they realize that it's a couple of Germans, and
they shoot through the wall.
They shoot through the wall, and then they
see
a thud.
And then they see one guy kind of fall down.
Yeah.
And they see a pool of blood kind of going.
Yeah, just
over
coming in through the doorway, and then they think that they got it, and they go out there, and there's another one.
Yep, there's more shots, and the other guy he gets shot in the neck.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he's down, and then
he's down.
German comes in.
You could tell it's hit the artery,
yeah.
right? And so it's like a sprinkler.
Yeah,
it's just spurting blood.
So the German comes in and he attacks Mellish, and they're kind of in hand to hand. They're kind of rolling around on the floor, fighting. And Mellish pulls out his bayonet, and the German takes it from him. And so they're kind of fighting, and this whole time, Upham
just down that stairwell.
Upham found the courage to move off the wall. And he starts walking really slowly toward the stairs, gets about halfway up the stairs and just freezes and just sits down and starts crying.
He's just crying.
And meanwhile, it keeps cutting between Upham and Mellish. And Mellish is on his back. This German is on top of him. And he's got his knife and he just shoves it right into Mellish's heart.
Right. And he just tells her, he just quiet down. It's going to be easier this way. You can just kind of see the fear on Mellish's face as this is happening.
And so once the German kills Mellish, then he stands up, walks back out, and Upham
walks right by Upham.
Upham is still sitting halfway up the stairs, crying. And he looks up and he sees the German standing at the top of the stairs, and so he stands up.
He looks at him, and he just walks right by him.
He stands up, kind of backs up against the wall, and to let the German through. Let him walk past him. And so the German, he's walking down, he kind of glances over at Upham and realizes he's not a threat. So he just keeps going.
So, this will round all this out very soon. There's a lot of viewers that have mistaken this guy for Steamboat Willie. This is not Steamboat Willie. This is a different character.
This is not Steamboat Willie.
But I know some people have mistaken them before. Anyway, so we get back to the thrust of the action. They've taken care of some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan has shown even Miller how to kind of just throw some of these little bombs they have. They'll just explode right as soon as they throw them, right?
They have mortars.
Grenades, but
they have mortars, but they don't have the mortar tubes. And so Miller thinks that, they're worthless. And
that's right.
So Ryan's like, no, you don't need the tube. You can. So he picks one up and he bangs the end of it.
That's right. That's what
primer.
It is. Yes.
He basically bangs the primer on a piece of metal, real hard, and then throws it. And it explodes. Basically,
they take care of a bunch of guys this way. They get the other Tiger tank, but they're still getting overwhelmed at this point, right? Because at this point you have Reiben, you have Upham, you have Miller, you have Horvath, and you have Ryan. Right, the five. Mm-hmm. So, but they're needing to, they realize they got to get the Alamo.
Yeah.
So they're going to rendezvous back there. They're running. As they're getting kind of down that way, Horvath gets shot, right? Mm-hmm. And he gets, and then he kind of, Miller kind of captures him, right? Carries him across the bridge. And they're all across the bridge now. And they're kind of just waiting for a point where they can kind of blow up the bridge.
Yep.
Right. So, but now you have the Germans on the other side, and they're stationed there. They're ready just to keep shooting at them on the other side of the bridge. And they kind of get separated from the trigger to blow the bridge up, right? Yeah. And up he's still on the other side. He's actually on the other side with the Germans, right? And he's still kind of cowering, kind of kind of like a little trench, where the Americans were earlier.
And meanwhile, the guy that Upham let go, like the German that he let pass, has rejoined his group.
Yes.
Yeah, he's rejoined his squad, and
now we do see Steamboat Willie is there as well. So you got both of them there. They got the German he let pass and Steamboat Willie. They're all there now, right? And they're just firing to the end of the bridge, right? And so then finally, Miller sees a chance to be able to actually blow the bridge.
Yeah. So,
but as he's going across, like he's already been hit once, but
yeah. So as he's
it's not a fatal type wound, right? But he's going across to blow it, and then that's when you see Steamboat Willie, right?
Well, no, it's not Steamboat Willie. It's
that is Steamboat Willie. There.
No, it was the same one that Upham let go. That Upham let down the stairs.
Is it?
Yeah, because I was paying close attention to this one.
Okay,
this time because Upham pisses me off. This movie. If he would have just gone up there to help Mellish, would have taken this soldier down, then
right,
the rest of the squad wouldn't have been taken out.
Yes,
So it's
Miller
the same
gets
guy
shot.
Miller gets,
but he's still able to.
The same guy shoots Miller, and so he's so Miller drops down. So he's kind of got his back up against the Jeep, or is it a half track that he's up against? Either way,
so.
He's sort of sitting there, and he pulls his pistol out, and there's a tank driving straight toward him.
Yeah,
and so he's just
shooting,
popping off some shots at the tank, And it's actually this scene with Miller, shooting his pistol, laying back and shooting his pistol, is actually believed to be one of the inspirations for Call of Duty, where or at least
I could see that,
or at least where when when you're playing Call of Duty and you take a mortal wound, it drops you to the ground and you automatically pull out your pistol.
Again, this movie has not just influenced movies; it's influenced video games and media in general.
Yeah. So he's firing off a few shots at the tank, knowing that a little pistol's not going to do anything, but he's going to go down fighting.
Yeah, he's going to go down fighting.
And then he fires one more shot, and the tank explodes.
Yeah.
And he kind of has this shocked look on his face, and then we see a plane fly over, a P-51 Mustang fly over.
Yeah, and then you see the reinforcements. You see these other planes kind of come in, right? And they start shooting at some Germans on the other side.
So the planes are coming. They're dropping bombs on the tanks, and they're shooting, strafing the Germans, and pushing them back.
And now this is the point when Upham decides he can show himself now. And there's a bunch of Germans there. They're willing to surrender. Right.
And he walks right up to the guy that he let go down the stairs and shoots him.
Now
the guy that just shot Miller. Yeah. Just shoots him in the chest and lets him fall back into a pit, into a crater.
Yep. and the others just become POWs.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
so
then,
interesting thing
Ryan,
about Upham here, in particular, is a lot of the things I've read about it and the general idea with his character.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of this commentary, especially with the Mellish's death.
Yep.
Right. Is kind of this reflection of how like America and other allies were reluctant to step in and help the Jews at first.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they allowed them to suffer. And it was later when they were able to they joined the fight.
Okay,
so it's kind of a common thematic reading of kind of that situation.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so while Miller is sitting there dying, Ryan comes up to him and, Miller pulls him in close and he just says to him, make it worth it.
Yeah. Earn this.
Yeah, earn this. Yeah,
make it worth it.
Yeah. It's like, earn this. And then he dies.
Right. And then, Miller, he's looking around. Miller. Ryan's looking around. Miller, Miller's hand now no longer shakes, right? Yeah. And Ryan's looking around, and there's a bunch of the guys that he's already been with. They were killed in this battle. There's a few that are left alive, and Ryben, he's looking at this, right?
Yeah.
And he goes in because Miller took the note off of Wade, right?
Yeah.
Caparzo's what note, right? It's now Ryben, he takes it, right?
Yeah. Ryben and Upham are the only two members of the original squad that are still alive.
Which is really interesting because Upham's the one that's never seen battle. He's the coward, and he survives. And Ryben's the one that was most opposed to this entire mission in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And he survives. Right? So, but yeah, he's able to take that note off. And obviously the implication is that he will transcribe it and bring it to Caparzo's family. Right? And yeah, Ryan, he's just stuck there and he's just watching him. He's watching this and then unfold. And it fades
for some great
on his face.
Some great 1998 CGI. There's a time lapse there, and it ages him into this old man from the beginning.
Yes,
and
which we should say, if this was made today, that probably would just be Matt Damon, and then they would just age him.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, Harrison Young gets a role in this movie. Harrison Young plays old Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they credited it as Ryan as old man.
Yeah. And
so
he actually looks like he could be an older Matt Damon.
He does.
He looks very similar.
Matt Damon.
But yeah.
We've gone the entire episode without actually referencing
Team America. Matt Damon. So it's part of the reason why I've been referring to him as Ryan the whole time.
Yeah, so we want to say Matt Damon.
But anyway, so we see whose grave he's at finally, and he's at Miller's grave.
This is Captain John Miller,
and he's sort of kneeling down at it, and he starts talking, and he's like, "I hope."
So he's like, I've thought about those words he said to me that day at the bridge.
Yeah, I've thought about those words he said to me at the bridge, and I hope that I've earned it. I hope that I've made you and everyone else proud.
Right. I love how he has a 90s old man jacket on.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. I think once you hit a certain age in the 90s, they just gave you one of those jackets.
Yeah.
Because every old man had that jacket.
Is there like a equivalent? I don't know. Is there a 2020s old man jacket?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out when we hit like 65. See if somebody just shows up and gives us a jacket. Like, here, this is yours now.
This has been bequeathed to you.
You wear this all the time, even in the middle of summer. This is your uniform now.
Anyway, his wife comes up to him and is looking at him, and she's looking at the grave. It's an interesting look. She doesn't say the words like, "Oh, who is that man?"
Yeah,
right. But you can tell like this is an aspect of his life that he has never really shared with her.
Yeah.
Like maybe he's gone in this idea, like obviously he's talked a little bit about the war and probably it's like, oh yeah, all my brothers were killed but this is aspect of like this guy, Captain Miller, like gave his life so I could go home and get married to you and have this family.
Yeah.
Right. That's
all this life that we've had is because of this man.
But that actress, by the way, his wife, is Kathleen Byron. So, he did a bunch of UK movies. Anyway. So he doesn't really say that specifically, but like you can tell, that's really what he's getting at with this.
Yeah.
But he just asked her, am I a good man?
Mm-hmm.
Have I lived a good life?
And she doesn't know how to respond at first. He says, "Tell me I'm a good man."
That's right. Yes.
It's like, what? Tell me I'm a good man. And she says, "You are."
And, again, like you have you also have in the background like his son and like daughter-in-law and grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
They've all come along. Again, like we don't know exactly what's prompted this family trip to Normandy. Exactly like how it was said and how it came about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, the rest of them are probably unaware of this very important aspect of his life.
Yeah.
That has made it all possible.
Yeah. So his wife goes back with the rest of the family and he stands up, stands at attention and salutes.
And then we get another image of the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just waving.
Yeah, because at the beginning of the movie, we had the American flag with the sun behind it. So it's sort of a transparent looking flag.
Right.
You can't really differentiate the red, white, and blue on there just because of the brightness of the sun behind it. It just looks like it's all shades of blue.
Right.
And so we get that same shot. And then it goes into credits.
And it's funny, again, get the credits and it's interesting because we mentioned right before we started getting into this, like this is a John Williams score. It's very different than some of his more famous scores, right?
Yeah. No, it's not as upbeat as something like Indiana Jones.
Right. And there's actually a lot of aspects within this movie where you don't really have the score. It's just the sound of gunshots.
Yeah.
And mortars and grenades and all the other things going on, right? But I think it's very appropriate at the end. It's a kind of a somber, but also slightly patriotic kind of feel to it as it goes into the credits to finish the movie, which is Saving Private Ryan, not Saving Ryan's Privates.
Yes, nobody gets shaved in this movie.
Sorry, it had to eventually come up.
Yeah, it had to eventually come up. Yeah, this is not the porn parody version of this movie. So,
because as funny as it is, like, everyone's always taken this movie seriously, but it's been very easy to pun off that title.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's a fantastic movie.
It really is. It is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it's reflective. It's a harrowing movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these are characters again. Like, it's funny. Like, I don't think you would put any of them within the criteria of like famous movie heroes, right?
Yeah.
The greatest, yeah. But you look at all the characters in the movie and like you respect them. Well, I guess Upham, was a bit of a coward, but these other guys, like, yeah, you have this utmost respect for them for what and again, like they're fictional characters, that died to defeat the Nazis or to save a guy, to go home. And yeah, you have like all this respect for what they've done with it. And even though you might not, again, list them within these different lists of greatest movie characters, greatest such and such. But the movie itself, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the idea is like, again, like I think what they're doing is not to be heroes themselves, right? That's not the purpose of why they're fighting this war.
They're doing their duty.
Exactly.
They're not
Which
doing
is
it for
the
fame.
most heroic thing they can do.
They're not doing it for recognition. They're doing it because somebody has to do it.
Right?
And they're there to do it.
And we talked about this earlier, like there's all these other names, like in the beginning of the movie, like there's 100 deaths on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of them was doing this duty, even though within the movie, they're mostly anonymous outside of what we see happen, their quick death on the screen, right?
Yeah.
But they have their own story that could be tied in with something else. It could be made into a movie within this, Saving Private Ryan universe, quote unquote, right?
What brought this person, the guy that was searching for his arm, what brought him there?
Right.
What was his story before Normandy?
Or some of the other characters that we see that we don't see again. They go on to their next mission. What happens to them? Some of them are gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that mission? Do they die in some sacrifice so someone else may live?
Yeah. What about the rest of Ryan's squad?
Right. We don't know. And
Ted Danson.
So
what happened to him after I met with him?
So there's there's so many questions about it, and he just it's a movie that just forces you into that appreciation for the sacrifices others have made.
Yeah.
So yeah, terrific movie, and it's a movie I will easily watch again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's different because it's so many of our movies are not necessarily more upbeat, but
more
not as it's very different than what
heavy.
This presents.
It is a heavy movie.
Yes, not heavy. It's very heavy,
and so it's an excellent movie. It's well worth watching, but if you've never seen it before, keep in mind it is a heavy movie. It is a very
even
serious
something like
movie.
Silence of the Lambs. We've done Silence of the Lambs. Mm-hmm. That's a heavy movie, but it's a different heavy.
Yeah, it's a different kind of heavy. Yeah, and this one is very graphic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of blood, a lot of viscera in this movie.
Yes.
So if you haven't seen it, prepare for that if you're going to want to watch it.
And again, if you're someone that's very sensitive to things, it maybe is not a movie for you to watch.
Yeah. And that's
like
fine.
I said, like there are soldiers that or veterans that saw tried to watch it. They had to walk out because it was too intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I had to say about it.
Yeah. I think we covered this one pretty well. So, if all that said, if you enjoy what you're listening to, then go ahead and check us out on Facebook and Instagram and Threads. We are Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. The and is spelled out A&D. It's not an ampersand like it is in the name of the podcast. We are also on X or Twitter. There's R&T Cinematic. And if you want to check out some of our movie reviews, some movies we've done on the podcast and we haven't done, some we will do, some we won't do, then check out our Letterboxd. It is Cine Adventure or Cine Adventure, CINE Adventure. And you can also send us an email at robandtonycinematicadventure@gmail.com. Once again, the and is spelled out A&D. It's not an ampersand like the name of the podcast. Yeah, just let us know. What did you think of Saving Private Ryan? Do you love this movie? Do you hate this movie? Is it too much for you to watch? Is it just do you have any similar stories to the events of this? Are you a veteran that has experienced things like this?
Is there another war movie that really kind of speaks to that better for you? Right? We didn't even mention the same year that Thin Red Line came out, which another World War II movie, but in the Pacific.
Yeah,
and it's much more meditated than what this is. But yeah, we want to know.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. And yeah, if you enjoy what you're listening to, then go to your favorite, go to our social media, give us a like and a follow. Go to your favorite podcast app, wherever you're listening to us. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a good rating, a good review, some good comments. And, that's how we move up in the standings and the search and the recommendations, all that stuff. And, yeah, we just want to be able to reach out to as many people as we can, reach out to as many ears as we can, and share our love of the movies with you guys. And so next time, we're going to, of course, continue with our summer blockbuster series. And we're going a little bit different route than we normally do, than we have so far on this podcast.
I hope you like romance.
Yes, I hope you like romance.
I hope you like Whoopi
Goldberg, that is.
I hope you like the Sways.
That is right. And some Demi Moore. So that is right. We are going to be talking about Ghost next time. The Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg classic.
The highest grossing movie of 1990.
Mm-hmm. Highest grossing movie of 1990.
Does it hold up?
The movie that changed pottery forever.
Yes, it did. Yes.
So
I'm interested. Does this movie still hold up?
Yeah.
Does it not?
It has been a long time.
Has it been reevaluated and
movie.
Has it become a good movie again? We'll find out. I
don't know. We'll see. It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, so it'll be interesting to watch it again and hear your thoughts on it, share my thoughts on it. And yeah. So join us next time for Ghost.